Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for another Discover Wildlife evening. This evening, we are going to be whisked off to India and specifically to the Tiger Reserve of Nagarhole. Um, it's a reserve that we hold in very high regard, and we've got the wonderful Bret Charman talking about Nagarhole tonight. Bret's been lucky enough to lead several trips out there and will be leading again next year. As most of you will know, no doubt, Bret is a very good naturalist and he's also a very good photographer. We don't like to say it too often, but he is very talented. And tonight we're in for a treat. He's got some wonderful images which we'll be seeing probably over the next 45 minutes. As ever, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. You can put them to me in the chat or the Q&A forums, and I'll either respond to them as we're going along, or I'll put them to Bret at the end. There will also be the opportunity to request additional information at the end. Bret will, at the end of the talk, just set out the various trips that we offer to Nagarhole. There's about half a dozen in total, and give you a quick overview of them. So if any of those were of interest whatsoever, there'll be an opportunity, as always, just to kind of vote for them on a poll, and we'll be in touch tomorrow with the respective travel plans. I think that's probably enough from me. Nagarhole is massively up there on my list of places to go. I've been to India a lot and lived out there for a bit, and Nagarhole is top of my list. So I'm probably as excited about this talk as anyone. But yeah, I'll stop talking. I'll hand over to Mr. Charman. We're good to go.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. Lovely to have you here for the evening. So as Dan has talked about, I'm going to share some images and some information on Nagarhole National Park. It's a really, really wonderful part of India. I have been lucky enough to go there 3 times leading, and each time is a little bit different, obviously, which is the wonders of any wildlife tour. But yeah, you probably, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, wondering where it actually is. And India obviously is very well known for its central circuit, I suppose, and including the tiger reserves such as Bandhavgarh and Kanha and Tadaba, Pench, Panna, all of those sorts of places. So Nagarhole is a little bit off the beaten track, I suppose, in that regard. And if you're wondering where it is here. So you've got Bangalore pretty much in the centre of southern India. To the southwest of that, you've got the historical city of Mysore, which has got a beautiful palace, which you actually get to drive past, which is always a nice thing to see. And then Nagarhole National Park is southwest of that, on the eastern, sort of northeastern side of the Western Ghat Ranges. It's a really, really wonderful place. So we do a direct flight from the UK to Bangalore. It's a pretty straightforward, easy flight with British Airways. Nice and simple, no stops anywhere else. So direct flights are always much appreciated. And from there, it's about 4 hours to Nagarhole. We arrive in the morning in Bangalore and drive throughout the morning. We also have the opportunity to have breakfast in Bangalore and sort of skirt around Mysore to avoid any traffic, and end up at Nagarhole in time for a lunch. And then hopefully, as things all go to plan, we get the opportunity to go out for our first drive in the afternoon. What I will say is that this talk covers both a photography tour, which I lead, and also our generic sort of wildlife holiday to Nagarhole as well. The itineraries are pretty much identical, just one has a more photographic focus than the other. So in terms of what you're going to see, it's applicable to both trips. And as Dan has already said, I will talk about some of the other trips sort of in an overview sort of style at the end of the talk to give you an idea of what else we offer to this wonderful part of India. So what I really love about India, and I'm sure many of you who've already been can appreciate this, is that India is a place of sounds and colours and smells and obviously amazing wildlife sightings. But it's not like an African safari. You're listening for calls of the forest. And these can be anything such as peahens, peacocks, and what I love is when you're listening to these calls, you start to notice movement around you, whether that's a male peacock such as this showing off in the surrounding forest, or, it could be langurs in the trees, or, cheetah in the distance. And I think the thing to really get across about any safari in India is it so much of it is about sound and stopping and being silent and immersing yourself in this magical place. And I think India has a really ethereal quality to it when you're out, particularly in the morning. Things are just stirring, the forest is coming to life, and you're just waiting for something to walk out in front of you or for that alarm call to go off, and then try and work out what it is that's hopefully going to present itself to you. And there are all sorts of different things I said that can alarm. So the peafowl, the peahens, peacocks, they're one thing. There are macaques in this forest. These are actually bonnet macaques, so different to the rhesus macaques you see further north in central India. And these guys are pretty good characters, and you'll see them around the lodge as well. They do alarm, but not much, and they're not particularly reliable. These guys are probably the ones you hear alarming the most. The Malabar giant squirrel, beautiful species of squirrel, often feeding on trees, but they can alarm not just for big cats, but obviously for snakes, for birds of prey, all sorts of different species. So you never quite know uh, exactly what you're going to get, but you can usually tell if it's serious from the sort of ferocity of their calls, the frequency. And you can usually tell if it's a bird of prey from their behavior and things like that, and if it's a predator on the ground from the behavior. So they're a good indicator. And sometimes you get more than one species alarming together. So this is a Malabar giant squirrel, and in the background you can probably see is a grey langur, a Hanuman langur, and these are pretty good actually at alarming. They're pretty reliable and give you a really good indicator of what's in the area. They also look exactly where the predator is. So if they're looking in a specific spot, you can basically work out where they are. The grey langurs, if they're on the ground, you can be pretty sure there isn't one of sort of the iconic predators of India about. But they make great photographic subjects and are a lot of fun to watch. So always keep your eyes open for langurs because they are really charming little things. They're primarily leaf eaters, so most of the time you see them chomping away on the green leaves around the forest. What there is anyway at this time of year, when most of these pictures are taken, is April. We run tours typically from sort of, well, through the dry season, so after the monsoons all the way through the dry season, and you'll see the forest changing over time. It starts off sort of November, December time, can still be grass on the ground, quite green. And as you go further towards the monsoons again, which is sort of February, March, April, May, it gets hotter and hotter and drier and drier. The benefit of going at the time of year in the dry season is that the big cats and the prey species are drawn to the water sources. So sightings should, in theory, increase in frequency. But this is wildlife. You never quite know what's what. And working with local naturalists makes a massive difference. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a bit. As photographers, we're always looking for light. So I thought I should include some langurs with some nice backlighting, a bit of rim lighting on the subject. It's a wonderful place, Nagarhole, for the light. And different areas of the forest, I should say, have different lighting as well. And that's all part of the fun of it. Nagarhole is actually situated on a dammed river, the Kabini River, and the Kabini backwaters, as they call them, provide one of the boundaries to the park. It's actually a boundary between Bandipur Tiger Reserve and Nagarhole Tiger Reserve. But here it opens up onto sort of an open area of grassland where the water levels have dropped. There's no trees, and you can see a real myriad of species, but it also adds a nice different feel to it. Very open, very different from the sort of more sort of, they're not oppressive by any means, but sort of that condensed forest habitat that you get here. I obviously talked about earlier on about the different alarm calls. Again, one of the main species here in the forest is cheetal, the spotted deer. You have to take a cheetah alarm call with a pinch of salt. They can be pretty jumpy. So if they start calling their high pitched calls, there's a chance there's something there. But if it's just one or two calls, you probably just had a false alarm. And so you listen to them very carefully to see whether they're being serious or not, or whether someone's just basically made themselves jump. They get freaked out by their own shadows. So you have to take cheetah with a pinch of salt. There are two other deer species in the forest. One is sambar deer. And if a sambar alarms, you know you're in business. They only alarm if they've seen something. They don't jump at their own shadows. So it's important to take in those calls and listen to them. And the other species is Indian barking deer. And they also are pretty serious when they bark. It's a good sign that there's something about. But they can also be spooked by particularly vehicles and things like that. So sometimes if it's a quick barking call as they run away, it's quite often just a vehicle. But if it's a constant call, then you know it's probably a predator. The other big herbivore in the park, which you see pretty regularly, particularly down towards the backwaters of Kabini, is the gur or the gar. Um, these are also known as the Indian bison. They are not technically a bison at all. That's a common name for them, a popularized name. But they are a beautiful, beautiful animal, an absolutely vast bovid, and really impressive. This one's a youngster. This one is a male, and you can see the muscle mass on them. They look like they're sort of a cow on steroids, really. Pretty impressive beings indeed. And they always have those white stockings as well, so very easily identifiable. Quite different from the Indian or Asiatic water buffalo. Very different shape, obviously, and there are no buffalo in Nagarhole. It's important to make that very clear. But it gives you an idea of the sort of the variety of life in the park. It's certainly not a one sort of trick pony. It's not just a couple of species that offer you sightings. There really is a huge amount of diversity on offer, and that's one of the reasons why I particularly enjoy Nagarhole. It's important to say it is a bit different from central India for many reasons. Partly habitat, it's just noticeably different, and that's all part of the fun of it. There is an issue historically with lantana scrub, and the national park are doing a fantastic job at the moment of clearing this. It is done by hand, so it's a time-consuming process, but you can see some of that lantana scrub in the background of this image. It's going to take probably a few years to clear it, and then they'll probably have to keep clearing it to keep on top of it. But it does provide sort of shelter for the big cats in places, and it gives them sort of downtime away from vehicles, which I think is very important. And here's the Indian barking deer, just to give you an idea. So it really gives you a sense of the diversity of the herbivores and the species that will alarm and alert you to a tiger's presence or a leopard's presence, or even actually Asiatic wild dog, the dhole as well, which are also here. There are lots of smaller things in Nagarhole as well. So it's not just the big mammals that are on offer or the bigger birds as well, which we'll get to in a little bit. There's lots of small mammals, some amazing reptiles as well. Lots of sort of freshwater turtles in the ponds and streams and all sorts. This is actually an Indian grey mongoose. Quite elusive actually in Nagarhole, but a beautiful species. Really, really easily to see. They kind of remind me of a banded mongoose actually in Africa, for those of you that are familiar, but they obviously don't have those bands. Similar sort of size, similar sort of build, but they are more solitary or in ones and twos. You don't get the family groups. But they are a really lovely species, and actually Nagarhole is a fantastic place for a range of different mongooses. Probably the most sought after and probably the easiest to see actually is the striped-necked mongoose. It's quite a big mongoose, probably twice the size of a banded mongoose that you'd get in Africa. So it gives you an idea in terms of size. They're pretty chunky things, and they can be quite relaxed around vehicles, which is always fun. You don't really have them running away too much. They're quite happy feeding away next to you. Although being a sort of a ground dwelling animal in a thick vegetation area, that it can be sometimes a little bit harder to photograph, they are pretty easily seen. So, as I mentioned, we have the opportunity to do game drives for wildlife. So, you get to go out on game drives in the morning, in the afternoons, but there is also sometimes the opportunity to enjoy a boat trip. So, the lodge we use is a lodge called Kabini River Lodge. And the great thing about it is it has boats straight from the lodge that go along the backwaters, right in between the national parks of Bandipur and Nagarhole, and you can see an absolutely remarkable diversity of species, like truly, truly incredible. So the water birds here and the wading birds are out of this world, absolutely fantastic. And the mammals as well, I'll get to in a minute, are also on offer. So this is obviously an oriental darter, an aninga, a snakebird, whatever you want to call them. And there are hundreds of them. They're everywhere, and they're pretty relaxed as well, which is great for photographers. But it's unusual, quite often I find darters can be a bit flighty, but particularly when they're out in the open. But these guys, pretty content, quite happy to sit there, often sunning their wings, drying themselves out as this one was. And yeah, you always get different species. And the nice thing is by being in the boat, is that you get quite low, particularly later in the season. And the reason for that is the banks basically can be sort of at eye level as the water levels of the reservoir are dropping. So you can get these really lovely photographic opportunities, but also for anybody that's interested in their birds, it just provides you with fantastic viewing opportunities at eye level with many species that you're not familiar with and some that you are, such as this. The great white egrets are pretty common and plentiful around. Pretty much all the species of egret in India actually are here and very easily seen. So, I mean, that's certainly not a problem at all. Spoonbills are very common as well, easily photographed, easily approached, not at all bothered by the boats. And one of the nice things is the guides on board are always trying to point things out and get you as close as possible, but with obviously without disturbing the wildlife. We don't want to spook anything, and the boats just provide a wonderful opportunity to do that in an atmosphere which is very relaxed with beautiful light, particularly in the evenings again, and a real wonderful array of species. There are plenty of birds of prey along the water, including several ospreys. You get fish eagles here too. You really have an amazing selection of birds, absolutely remarkable. Pied kingfish is incredibly common as well, all around. Marsh mugger crocodiles, you name it, they're all along the waterways and provide constant sort of sightings. One of the fantastic things, particularly in the afternoon boat trips, is the sort of congregations of elephants you get down by the water. You can get some really big family groups. And I think this is one of the big sort of differences from Nagarhole to central India is the numbers of elephants. So obviously in central India, most elephants you see, unfortunately, are captive. Um, there are some reserves in northeast India, obviously, which have big herds of wild Asian elephant. But this part of India is home to basically the last sort of remnant of southern Indian wild elephants, and it is a vast population, and they travel all along the Western Ghats. And Nagarhole is just one of the areas where you can see them and where they're sort of relatively relaxed, particularly when they're not near the villages, obviously. And you can just get wonderful sightings of them, hundreds and hundreds of elephants in one boat trip alone. It really is quite fantastic and provides a very unique opportunity in my eyes. There are sometimes big tuskers as well, but they can be a little bit sort of more skittish sometimes, or they're sort of further away. For me, though, one of the big highlights of a boat trip is finding the smooth-coated otters that live here. There are a couple of different family groups. They are pretty habituated to the boats. Being otters, they are incredibly sneaky and like to pop up behind you nearly at every moment that you're trying to photograph them. But if you persevere and you get the guide to help you out, hopefully you'll get some fantastic views. And it's really lovely when you get the larger family groups because you get to watch them playing in the water, catching fish, going up on the shore, rolling around, feeding on the fish. It's a fantastic time. And for me, I think this just sums them up. They're really characterful, beautiful animals, and you can see how lovely that soft evening light is as well. And what I would say is that Nagarhole is a little bit different to central India in terms of temperature. So central India, particularly in sort of March, April, can easily be hitting 40 degrees. Nagarhole is cooler. It's not cool by any stretch of the imagination, but 30 to 34 is kind of your typical maximum daily temperature, and nights are more comfortable as well. So it is important to stress the differences, I suppose, between Nagarhole and central India in that regard too. So when you're back in the vehicles again, what I would say is keep your eyes peeled. There's always things around. So obviously, the way I talked about it, you find predators by stopping, by listening, by watching things around you. And when you're doing that, you start to see things that you might not ordinarily notice if you're driving around, particularly if you're on a traditional African safari, for example. You find things typically by looking and listening as well, but looking is your primary method of finding sort of your target species. Because in India you're listening for things, you can stop and you can look around and you can see things that you just might have missed. And this is an example of that. We were actually sat down by the Kabini waterways. We're actually watching elephants at this moment in time. And I turned around to see this crow throwing something. It's a jungle crow throwing something up in the air. And then I realized it was a rat, and it was just quite an amazing thing to see. two pretty common regular species, but suddenly it became quite interesting. And everybody actually stopped photographing the elephants and started to photograph the jungle crow. So it gives you an idea of what you might see as you sit and wait. And then it's the same for birds of prey. You know, there's things like shikra, changeable hawk eagle. This is a crested serpent eagle, but there's always things around. And I've even seen a couple of Malabar trogon here as well, which is worth saying. They're not common, but they are here. And actually, I'll talk a bit about Malabar trogon a little bit later on. But they are here, and the bird life in Nagarhole is exceptional. What I would say is that it can be a little bit more distant than maybe in other Indian national parks because of the habitat, and they're quite often in the higher canopy. But there is a real plethora of species. It's fantastic for barbets. You can see hornbills here as well. Obviously, several birds of prey, all sorts of smaller passerines as well. And yeah, it's a fantastic place to go. Indian rollers all over the place. Rufous tree pies are obviously around too. So always keep your eyes peeled. The lodge itself, we stay in is, as I said, Kabini River Lodge. It's important to say that it's not a basic lodge, it's a comfortable lodge, mid-range sort of accommodation. It has everything you need. The rooms are air conditioned, you have drinking water available to you, fully functioning bathrooms with hot water, obviously showers, flushing toilets, etc. Very, very comfortable in a beautiful private grounds, which are fantastic for wildlife. There's fruit bats in the tree, actually not far from this accommodation area. You get wild boar in the garden, bonnet macaques, amazing bird life, some birds galore on the flowers, all sorts of things. So always keep your eyes peeled. You never know what you might see during lunch. If you're wondering about food, Kabini was built as a lodge to serve domestic tourists, which is fantastic. So you get an amazing array of local dishes, fantastic foods every day. There are some limited Western options, but they do definitely try and cater. But vegetarians, meat eaters, whatever, you'll have more food than you can possibly eat, and it is absolutely delicious. I've been going, I said, for many years. I've been to this lodge 3 separate times, and I have never had any issues with the food at all. It is fantastic. So if you're ever worried about that going to India, please don't be. Particularly in Nagarhole, it's a fantastic place to go. The vehicles here are a little bit different from other parks in India. So India is known for its Suzuki Maruti gypsies. They are small, quite often only have one or two people in them. It can be, I've heard it being described as being wacky races, people sort of jostling for position and all sorts. Nagarhole is different. We have these larger vehicles, they're Mahindras. They take, well, we have 6 people in a vehicle, so 2 per row. And that basically enables us to have a vehicle exclusive to ourselves. And that's really important because if you don't have a vehicle full, then they will put other people in the vehicle. So if you're booking ones or twos, you will not have a private vehicle. So by joining a group tour, you can sort of guarantee that. We use a local driver who's also a fantastic guide, and then we use a naturalist guide who knows the park inside and out, and also has very good working relationships with the officials, which makes a massive difference to our experience and our sightings as well, because they really know their stuff. But also, the number of vehicles are heavily limited in the park. So, whereas in other areas of India, you might get 30 vehicles at a sighting, it's not impossible, hopefully not. Here, you will never get those sorts of numbers. It can still be relatively busy, particularly when you compare it maybe to an exclusive African safari, but most of the time, it's not a problem in any way, shape, or form. And actually, I've had the most amazing private sightings of cats, some of which I'll show you some photographs of in a minute, so you can see what I mean, just sort of what the opportunities are like. So please don't be worried about these sort of crazy numbers of vehicles driving around at high speed. Nagarhole also has GPS units it gives to each driver so they cannot speed. If they speed, they will lose the opportunity to drive in the park again. So it's very well run, and it's very important to stress that. It is very different experience indeed. It doesn't detract from central India, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination. It's still fantastic. So as I said, India, most of the reserves in central India, you don't get to see wild Asian elephants. In Nagarhole, you get to see these large tuskers, and it is amazing. I'll just play it again so you can see it, but he's got massive tusks, absolutely huge, a beautiful elephant. And these are not by any stretch the biggest tusks of any elephant in the area. but they provide a completely different sort of experience when you're on safari. And some of the elephants are really, really obliging too. So you never have to have really distant sightings of these really timid elephants. Sometimes they can be really quite obliging. Some are more nervous than others, but some are very, very relaxed around vehicles, and you can be treated to some excellent views. What I would say is that whilst you're around elephants, keep your eyes peeled because there can always be other things on offer. And one of the things about Nagarhole is it's not famous for its population of sloth bear. However, this one particular road is actually quite reliable for them if you put in the time. I'm not going to say you'll see them, but you've got a good chance if you go in the mornings on the main road in zone B, I think it is. It's a really, really reliable place. So we try our best. And actually, this photograph here was taken back in 2019, I think it was, when I led a tour for the first time in Nagarhole. And we were watching this elephant, and then we realized there was a sloth bear. Fantastic. What amazing luck. But this year, I saw a sloth bear in basically where this photograph is taken. I was where the elephant was looking back up the hill and had this sloth bear. So it's a pretty reliable area, and this is probably the best sloth bear sighting I've ever had anywhere because it actually had its head up, which they just don't really do. Typically, sloth bears are head down into a termite mound, kicking up dirt, which we did see this one doing, hence all the bits all over it. But then it decided to walk through this beautiful long grass and then out onto the open road. So we got some fantastic views of it, and it wasn't really at all bothered by our presence, which is really, really wonderful. So sloth bears, I can't say you will see them, but you have a good chance in Nagarhole, particularly if you're prepared to put in the time, and it's worth speaking to your local guide, and they should know exactly where to go, and they're so experienced that they should be able to spot them. When you're seeing elephants, as I said, you never know what else you might see. Nagarhole has got a fantastic population of dhole. Um, they can be harder to see because they move long distances, obviously, in search of food. They cover big ground, but they can be very, very reliable in an area. So it's always worth keeping your eyes peeled, particularly down by the Kabini backwaters again. It's an area they prefer. It's open. They can run fast, hunt down their prey. And yeah, I've seen them every time I've been to Nagarhole. Some sightings are more distant than others. But also, the last two times I've been to Nagarhole, I've got to watch elephants chasing wild dogs, which is particularly fun. Provides some great photographic opportunities, but also, it's just wonderful to watch. If you're wondering why the trees have all been cut down here, this is actually where they cut down trees for the reservoir when they dammed it back in the day. And they're still there, the trees, to this day. And when the reservoir drains down for agricultural use, basically the water level it exposes the cut down trees. So that's what that is. It's not modern deforestation, just to in case you're concerned. The dhole are one of my favorite species, and if you put in the time and again you work with the local guides, then hopefully you can be rewarded with some amazing sightings. On previous tours, we've had kills happen in front of vehicles. We've seen adults with pups. I've seen dhole surround a wild boar in a muddy lagoon, in sort of a waterhole, drying waterhole. So it's definitely worth sticking with them. And if the guide says he thinks he can get ahead of them, then I would definitely listen to them because they probably know where they're going next. And that's how we got this shot. We got ahead of a pack of dogs. We didn't actually know that these were coming. I should say this was a fortuitous moment. But this is what you can do. You can get ahead of the pack and have them come towards you, and then you get these beautiful, beautiful images. And there's nothing like being eye level with a wild dog as it's walking towards you. And I actually think Asiatic wild dogs are some of the most beautiful canids on earth. So I'm probably a bit biased, but there you go. They are a wonderful species to see. What I would say is that Nagarhole has probably earned its reputation more so for its leopards than tigers, particularly originally. Now that's changing. Tigers are becoming a lot sort of more regularly seen. Nagarhole, as I said, is a pretty thick habitat environment. So there's some very dense areas and some beautiful old trees, some big trees, and different areas of forest as well, different habitats. One of the things I would say is that a lot of the leopard sightings are in branches, such as this. Some of them can be right by the roadside, some of them can be crossing the road, some will be walking along the road. But typically, from my experience, they're in trees and often in vegetation, sort of canopies such as this. What I love actually is photographing these cats in this habitat. So I really enjoy it when you get to see an animal in its environment. And these guys, when you spot one in a tree, it's amazing. And the guides, I should say, have got the most remarkable vision. How they spot some of these things, I do not know. But this leopard was a beautiful young leopard sat high in a tree. And we managed to position our vehicle in such a way that everybody could get a view. Really, really fantastic. Sometimes, and I should say sometimes, you get a leopard encounter that you'll remember for many, many years. And I'm very lucky. I lead in South Luangwa in Zambia, for those of you that know it. Actually, I'm going there on Saturday. Can't wait. But anyway, I'm very lucky. I've seen many, many, many leopards. And still, for me, seeing an Asiatic leopard is a real thrill. They're, I think, prettier than African leopards. Don't tell the leopards in Zambia, please. But yes, they're absolutely stunning. Very slight, dainty, pretty leopards. And this year, when I was in Nagarhole, we went specifically looking for a female that's very well habituated. And we drove down a hill in a territory where we knew she was around, and we didn't see her. And we parked at the bottom, turned the engine off, and we sat silently for probably 10 or 15 minutes. We sat there, the cheetah were all around us, the spotted deer, no alarm calls, nothing. The forest was completely silent. There was a light mist in the air. It was a really ethereal, magical morning, but there was almost no sound in the forest. And it was quite spectacular, actually. Normally you hear something, even if it's in the distance, even if it's a flameback or something banging on the tree, or a hornbill calling in the distance, or, something will be there. This day, nothing. So we started to drive back up the hill. And then our guide Varun shouts, well, he just said, stop, 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 stop. And there was this beautiful leopardess sat up a tree. She was absolutely stunning. And she just sort of, I think she basically thought we had driven past and disappeared. So she was like, right, I'm going to climb the tree and just relax. Just so happened we came back. And to start with, she was a little bit unsettled, not because of us. I think she was just trying to get comfortable in the tree and hadn't yet found her spot. So we found her on this side of the tree. Then she moved to this side of the tree. And this was an exclusive sighting. We didn't have a single other vehicle around. We had her all to ourselves for probably more than 20 minutes, I reckon. We had the most wonderful sighting. You could see the misty morning behind sort of this ghostly feel to the sighting. It was really, really spectacular. And at this point, you can tell that she's interested in us, looking at us, but she wasn't at all stressed or bothered. She was just simply interested, I think, in the movement from our vehicle, particularly because there were six very excited people trying to get pictures of her. But she really was a spectacular cat. And the perfect poser. What more can you ask for when you get a cat that sits like this from you, less than 20 yards away in a tree with no other vehicles around? I mean, it is perfect. Nothing better than that in India. And if you're wondering how stressed she was, she ended up falling asleep like this. So yes, she was not stressed. She was not at all worried by our presence. And actually, we stayed for about another 15 minutes after this. And we did actually let other people know that we had this amazing cat all to ourselves, because other people had given us some favors earlier in the week of where things had been. So, we thought it was only fair to tell them what we had seen. But she really put on one heck of a show and just rewarded us with the most stunning photography. But obviously, if you're not interested in photography, just seeing a leopard like this is, well, for most people, is once in a lifetime. It's really, really spectacular. And if you put in the work in Nagarhole, this is entirely feasible. And what I would say is this photography tour that I'm talking about, a Nagarhole Photo Safari, or our Wild Dogs, Tigers, and Leopards tour, um, which is sort of the generic wildlife trip, both of them spend 7 days in the park. It is absolutely fantastic because you're not in a rush. You can take your time. You get to know the park. You get to recognize areas. You get to understand it. And with all of that, you can spend time looking for things, taking your time. You don't have to rush from sighting to sighting. And that is key in India. If you can take your time and immerse yourself in the forest, then you will be treated to the most wonderful wildlife sightings. It's like nowhere else. It's fantastic. But leopards are not all you can see in Nagarhole. It is a fantastic place for tigers too. My record in a week is 14 individuals. Uh, might have cheated a little bit because this family here had a mother with four cubs. So, I mean, five in one go is sort of, you know, well, it's cheeky, isn't it, really? Let's be honest. If you get five tigers in one sighting, then it's a good day. You can't say anything other than that. But what I really love about seeing tigers in Nagarhole is how different the habitat is depending on which tiger you're watching. Sometimes they're in these really lush sort of pockets of forest where it's nice and cool and damp, and the vegetation's rich and green. And the great thing is when you're watching tigers like this as well, there's birds all around you, Malabar parakeets and rose ring parakeets and all sorts of things all around you. Flamebacks flitting from tree to tree, rufous tree pies above, rollers looking for food on the ground. Even a trogon may be up above you. You never know what's around, and that's all part of the fun of it. But the tigers obviously are a massive draw for so many. And sometimes you just stumble across them, and other times you spend hours waiting for them to come out. And when they come out, that sense of elation, the goosebumps, some people have tears in their eyes. It is undeniably, magically, fantastically wonderful. There is no other way to describe a tiger. They are just out of this world. There's something truly, truly wonderful about seeing tigers in the wild. And these are all photographs taken in Nagarhole. So it gives you a real sense of the different habitats. Some areas of open forest, some areas of thick scrub that you just saw, lush, green, dry. And these are all within a couple of miles of each other. At the same time of year, all of these photographs are taken within a week of each other over different sort of years, obviously. This is another exclusive tiger sighting. We were driving along, minding our own business, actually heading back towards the lodge when Varun goes, stop, 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 stop. And we'd actually driven straight past her. She was just laying off in the forest. And their camouflage is so fantastic. I mean, it's very easy to miss a tiger unless you're sort of staring at it at that moment. And she was just an absolute star. Nobody else around. We didn't tell anyone else. We just had a wonderful sighting. She was actually on a path. We assumed she'd heard the vehicle coming and had just stopped and waited, hoping we'd drive past. Unfortunately, these annoying sort of tourists happened to stop and spot her, thanks to Varun, our local guide. But she put on one heck of a show for us, walking straight past us through some trees, just wonderful. I mean, the lighting was a little bit tricky. It was behind her as a fussy photographer. But for tiger viewing itself, you can't ask for more than that. It really is absolutely exceptional. This was a really wonderful sighting. This was actually last year. We'd heard about a young tigress who was stalking a herd of gore. There were probably about 7 or 8 fully grown, a couple of youngsters. We found her hiding behind this tree stump, watching it. We managed to get ourselves into this most amazing position, and we weren't the first vehicle there. There were about 4 or 5 vehicles at the time. And we got into this position where we could see the tiger and the gore behind. Perfect. What more can you ask for? Well, it turns out you can ask for more. What happened was the gore somehow caught wind of the fact there was a tiger there. Probably because there were 5 vehicles and they thought there's no way on earth that there are going to be 5 vehicles looking at us. There must be a cat. And sure enough, there was a tiger watching them. And they eventually saw her and started to make chase. A tiger against that many adult gore hasn't got much chance, and she turned and ran. Unfortunately, she actually quite liked the look of our vehicle. Well, maybe I should say fortunately, because it was absolutely amazing. She came bounding towards us. She actually had I don't know if you can see her right paw, but she actually has a bit of a sort of wound. Actually, I'm just going to draw so you might be able to see. I don't know if you can see that. I'm sort of drawing, but on her paw there, let me change the color for you. Let me do that, and then we can let's do green, and then it's right here for those of you that can't see. So she's actually got a wound on her paw, and she was hobbling. So she actually started to run on 3 legs rather than all of her legs. And basically, what happened was, I think she assumed our vehicle was quite a nice, safe place to get away from these charging bovids. So she came galloping towards us at high speed. And I'm pretty sure she was planning on jumping in until we sort of moved, basically, to sort of hint that maybe this wasn't the best place to refuge. And she turned at the last second and ran right past us within a foot of the client at one side of the vehicle. Absolutely amazing sighting. Unbelievable. I've never had a tiger so close to my vehicle at full gallop before. Had some walking past, but never at full gallop. Absolutely amazing. And all the gore, see, chasing her and noise and chaos everywhere. And then she disappeared and slinked off into the bush. What I should say is that she's now fully recovered. She's very healthy, doing very well for herself. So it didn't sort of disturb her too much, despite the fact she was a little bit skinny at the time. She's absolutely fine and she's flourishing in this wonderful habitat. So one of the wonderful things about Nagarhole is there's a real series of water holes all around, and obviously these are a focal point for finding tiger. Um, they can be hit and miss. Sometimes you can turn up and there just happens to be a tiger there. Other times you hear alarm calls and you sit and wait, knowing that there's a good chance that the tiger will come to water. And again, this is where the local naturalist and the driver come into their own. They've got years of experience in these parks. They know the tigers intimately and they know the paths between the different water bodies. So they know which way the tigers are going to go. So they can work out from the alarm call where we need to sit in order to maximize the chance of coming across a tiger. Sometimes it might be in the forest on an open area or in between sort of patches of thicker vegetation. Sometimes it will be at a waterhole itself. This time, when we took this picture, we came across her lying in the water and there were other vehicles there as well. But as you can see, we had fantastic views. She wasn't at all bothered. She was cooling down in the heat of the day. Like I said, not at all bothered. She was yawning. She got up, but it wasn't because of us. She just decided that she was going to go off into the forest. She actually had a couple of cubs nearby, so she was probably going to nurse those. But it just goes to show the opportunities that you can see. Other times you have to wait and wait and wait, and you listen to alarm calls, and then something like this happens, and it is spectacular. There's a client who won't want me telling you this, but we had been waiting for this tiger for probably an hour and a half, I'm guessing, something along those lines. I can't remember. Anyway, a changeable hawk eagle decided to land on the water's edge to the left of this photograph, quite a maybe 30, 40 yards away from where this tiger is stood. There was no tiger. Changeable hawk eagle starts to drink, opening its wings, flapping around, creating some amazing photographic moments, and the whole group got pictures. One of the group decided to keep photographing said changeable hawk eagle, as myself, Varun, and the guide are saying, "Tiger, tiger! You should really look to the right, guys, because there's a tiger coming." Four of the group look one way. One of the group stays looking at the changeable hawk eagle. So note to self: if the alarm calls are getting very loud, stop looking at the changeable hawk eagle and look for the tiger, because you get sightings like this, and it's unbelievable. Unbelievable light, amazing sighting. She walked straight out in front of us and then walked down and went for a swim. What more can you ask for? Unbelievable. The perfect tiger sighting. Absolutely out of this world. Anyway, no names are mentioned, and their anonymity will stay with me forever, except for when I'm next with them. But yes, indeed, what a wonderful sighting. You can't ask for more than that. And I know many of you are asking, what about the black leopard? Yes, Nagarhole became famous because of a black leopard. And that's what piqued our interest in this amazing tiger reserve. I can report at present, as far as we know, he is still alive. He is no longer in this part of the national park, but fear not. I will get on to some information for you all imminently. But yes, he's still around. He's past his prime, but he's still around. And it sounds like there might be others who may provide us some glimpses in the future. But it cannot guarantee a sighting of a black leopard in Nagarhole, but it was historically the most reliable place in India. So yes, that's why I haven't spoken about him up until this point. And yes, I have seen him in the past, and he is absolutely stunning. He's now a little bit beaten up. He's got quite a few scars on his face, but please, please, please don't go there expecting to see him. There's a slight chance, but I cannot guarantee anything. I'm going to talk to you quickly now about some other destinations that feature Nagarhole. So if you want to include it in another tour, maybe with some other areas, rather than just doing a single center focus, then this gives you some inspiration. So one of these tours is India's Big Cats, and this combines gear, where you can see Asiatic lion, but also leopard as well, and even wild dog. I know it's not a cat, but you can see Asiatic wild dog there too. Some very comfortable accommodation, a fantastic place to stay, but it gives you the only chance to see Asiatic lion. There's nowhere else you can see them. So if you want to see Asiatic lion in the wild, this is the place to go. Um, the next stop on the Big Cats tour takes you up to the Himalayas, and it takes you to Uli Valley, where you stay in this wonderful, wonderful place in the most magical landscape you can possibly imagine, at altitude, obviously. And here you are doing everything you can to find snow leopards. But where you find snow leopards, there's obviously plenty of other wildlife. There's blue sheep, there's markhor, there's red fox, partridge, maybe even wolves. You never quite know what's around, but obviously the focus is these guys, snow leopards. It's a big cats tour of India, so you've got to look for a snow leopard. What else can you have? Sightings are typically distant. It's worth saying you'll need a very, very, very long lens, probably with a converter, or a telescope, which is provided and the most reliable way to watch these amazing animals. But it provides you a fantastic opportunity to see these cats in the wild. From there, we fly you south and you go to Nagarhole. So you get to experience everything that I've just talked about, as well as seeing the snow leopards, as well as seeing the lion and maybe leopard in gear. But you can get to see hopefully leopard here and tiger too. So what more can you really ask for from a trip? Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. The next trip is India's Wild South, a little bit of a different trip for you. It combines a few different national parks, the first of which is, funnily enough, Nagarhole National Park. Surprise, surprise, a wonderful way to start the trip. It gives you an introduction, I guess, to many of the sort of familiar species of this part of southern India. And because it's on the sort of northern end, I suppose, of the Western Ghats, it's just worth sort of starting off here and working our way to some other areas. From there, we go to a wonderful private reserve called Fringe Fjord, which is on the edge of Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary. And basically, here our primary focus are on some of the amazing birds. And I spoke earlier about Malabar Trogon in the Nagarhole sort of section of the talk. And Nagarhole, it is possible to see them there, but they're unreliable. Here is one of the best places in India to see a Malabar Trogon, as well as Malabar Oriental Pied Hornbill. Um, uh, Malabar Pied Hornbill. Sorry, getting my species confused. There is an Oriental Pied Hornbill as well, and a wealth of other species as well. And it's fantastic for macro life. Huge amounts of birds, and there are other sort of species around as well, mammals in particular. But yeah, that gives you an idea of what's on offer there. And the next spot is Animal Tiger Reserve, and obviously the name says Tiger Reserve, but our primary focus here is actually these guys, the lion-tailed macaques. So they are, it's an entirely different species from what you'll see in these other two reserves. Pretty iconic to this area of India, and a really sought after species as well. There's also Nilgiri tar, I think, that can be spotted in this part of the world. So it's worth sort of appreciating, I suppose, the diversity that southern India can offer you. Another lovely group tour is Wild Karnataka. This one actually is a little bit different. So it focuses on Bandipur, which is the tiger reserve opposite Nagarhole I talked about, which is actually a fantastic place to see wild dog. Great to see all the deer species again, and tiger as well. But it's fantastic also for a wealth of other species. But then we combine that again with Fringe Fjord that I just talked about. And that provides us, this is the Malabar Pied Hornbill, by the way, as well as a host of other bird species, obviously, before returning to Nagarhole, where you can focus on the birds and the mammals, sort of the Indian rollers and your tigers, and all the sort of more common species that you'd expect to see in India. So it gives you an idea. And finally, last but not least, we're working on a new tour. So keep your eyes peeled, everybody. This is a little bit of a sort of exclusive feature, which is the natural wonders of Nagarhole. And what we're doing here is we're combining the east and the west. And traditionally, Nagarhole, we've only explored the east. That's where we stay at Kabini River Lodge. And we're still going to do that and still look for tigers and leopards and, all the usual things. But we're going to head west. and the western side is greener, it's lusher, it's on the western side of the mountains. Well, I should say hills at that point, they're not really mountains. Um, but it is on the western side, so you get the rains from the Indian Ocean. And it provides a wonderful, wonderful property. This is Makan Wilderness Lodge. Lovely accommodation set in a beautiful location. And here you have a chance to see, hopefully, sloth bear with a little bit more reliability than the eastern side. You also have a really good chance of seeing more elephants, sorry, including hopefully some big tuskers. There will be some different bird species probably as well because of the changing habitat, which is fantastic. But it also might give you an opportunity to see the black leopard and possibly even other black leopards. So we cannot guarantee any of that, obviously, but it should provide a really lovely experience that provides something a little bit different from our traditional Nagarhole safaris. So I'm gonna finish up um, and just really say thank you for your time. Obviously, I'm going to be able to answer any questions. So hopefully you've been sending them in. I haven't actually been looking. Hopefully Dan has. And yeah, if you've got any questions, I will do my absolute best to answer them for you. So Dan, what have we got?
We've got lots of questions, but before we get started on those, I'd just like to say well done. That was exceptional. I get to listen to a lot of these talks, and that was comfortably one of my favorites. I think you're a very good storyteller, and you have the images to back it up. So really well done, mate. I've got a load of questions here. The
Shoot.
chat forum has been busy and Q&A. So we'll rattle through them as quickly as we can. Are mozzies an issue in Nagarhole?
There are some mosquitoes, but I haven't really ever had any problems with them. I've had probably a couple of bites in all the times I've been there. Obviously, you are down by water, but it's a large body of water, which is better, basically. So it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but there will be probably a couple of mosquitoes around. There aren't mosquito nets in the room, and malaria isn't prevalent, so it's not something that is massively concerning for sure.
Don't recall hearing too much in the way of feedback about them or
Uh,
them being problematic. So yeah, I
I
guess
think,
it's just usual kind of efforts to cover up and stick
yeah,
some spray
exactly.
on stuff. Yeah, good
Yeah.
stuff. How's the food at Kabini?
If you like Indian food, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely amazing, like unbelievable. Some of the best food I've ever had in India. It's a buffet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but probably 10 dishes to choose from.
wow. Okay.
Loads of options, traditional desserts as well, traditional breads, amazing rice. Usually a pasta dish or something like that for people that are not too keen on food. In terms of spice, some things are spicier than others, and they will usually try and tell you which ones are the spicy ones.
Mm,
But they usually have a dal and stuff that's very mild as well. And breakfast they'll do fried eggs, omelets, masala omelets.
wow.
Traditional Indian cuisine as well, toast, butter, fruit. So
Fine.
yeah,
I think we need
it's
to
not going
stop
to
there.
starve.
Not having had dinner tonight, that all sounds very good right now.
Nor have I.
Okay. Are there other lodges available for accessing Nagarhole other than Kabini River Lodge? Why do we use Kabini River Lodge? There's a reason
Okay,
for that.
so it's a very good question actually. So Kabini River Lodge is actually a government-run lodge by Karnataka State, and basically all of the vehicles that are used in Kabini, well Nagaholi I should say, are operated from Kabini. So if you stay at any other lodge, you have to come to Kabini to start your safari, which is a quirk of how it is because then you have to drive back past the other lodges to go back into the park. So it's very strange. I can't necessarily explain it other than the fact it's obviously tied to the government. Um, but
Indian bureaucracy, to be honest.
exactly,
Yeah.
Indian bureaucracy gone mad, but it benefits us by staying at Kabini for that reason. And
Yeah.
actually, we built up a really good relationship with them over the last sort of 6 years or so. And they're fantastic and they'll do most things they can to accommodate us however we want them to. So they are fantastic, and the staff are great too. So yeah, that's why we stay there.
I'd second that. Any wildlife in the lodge grounds?
Oh yeah, loads. Fruit bats, owls in the trees, monkeys every day, wild boar at night, frogs, reptiles,
Civets at all?
butterflies. There probably are. I've not seen them, but I'm sure
Okay.
there are. There'll be wild cats as well.
So,
Um,
so if you're, I mean, what would a typical day look like in terms of timings and stuff?
so we typically get up before light, try and get to the gate for entry, which I think is 6. I can't remember, 6 or 6:30. I can't remember exactly. So we get there always for opening, first vehicle typically, if we can, and then you come back, have breakfast. So we go out before breakfast, come back for a full breakfast, have some downtime, then we go for
Morning,
lunch.
mid to late morning.
Yeah, mid to late morning
Yep.
typically. Then we have lunch, middle of the day, an hour or two downtime after lunch, probably an hour actually, really, by the time it comes to it. And then we head out again into the park until the light's gone, and then we make a speedy dash back to the park exit to make sure we're not late. And then dinner, basically, usually pretty much as soon as we get back because it's just easier. And then for those that want to, I mean, most people go to bed, but you could wander around the grounds with a torch and see what you can find. I mean, it's perfectly safe. There's nothing
Yeah.
to worry about. And yeah,
Cool,
so if
cool, cool.
anybody ever wants to do that, we can sort that.
Brilliant stuff. On the drives, is there the opportunity for toilet stops at all?
Yes.
Um, yep, cool.
Yeah.
Simple. What else have I got? We've got the times. Is there a good month? And I'm not sure about this one to see dolls. I don't know if that's one we
Um,
might need to check with the local guides.
I don't think there's specifically a best time. I think
Hmm.
it very much depends on tiger behavior,
Yeah,
and probably even elephant behavior actually, because the elephants hate them.
yeah,
So it will depend month by month. You probably get a month where you're just lucky and they're around all the time, and then a month where
yeah.
they're quieter. But I've always seen
It,
them.
it, yeah, it might be that with this particular person, if that's their main purpose for traveling, that they simply, that we keep our ears to the ground and keep
Yeah,
in contact with the local guides. And if there's a pack denning or something like that, that's going to be when they're most reliable, isn't it?
yeah,
And
exactly.
it might be if you can travel at short notice, that would be the best way of doing that.
Yeah.
Um, Good stuff. I think we're getting there. And oh, there is one final question here, just around King Cobra. Have you ever seen King Cobra out there?
No, but they are there.
They are there, aren't they?
I know guys that have seen them.
Yeah.
So the driver's
Well,
seen one, and I know Varun's seen one, who I use for my trips. So yeah,
yeah.
they are definitely there.
Ashwin, who we also use out there, he's an extremely good guide as well. He does also know of a couple of sites for King Cobra where you can see them kind of displaying and stuff, doing their little
In
mating dance.
in the hills all around there will be prime king cobra habitat for sure. It's perfect.
So that would be one which we'd need to check the seasonality, but we could probably tag that onto one of the group trips if necessary. I would
You
imagine it would probably be in the monsoon, actually, thinking about it.
probably best bet is when they're breeding because they'll have a nest and you can
Mm,
kind of guarantee that they're going to be in that area at that time. So
okay. Good stuff. Well, Peter, if that is of interest, give us a shout. So, if any of the trips that Bret has talked about tonight are of interest, please do request the trip of interest. And as I say, we'll be in touch tomorrow. And I think that is everything, Bret.
okay.
I'll leave that poll ticking over just for a minute or two longer. Um, Hold on. Oh, forgive me. One more question just
Yep.
before we sign off. Uh, do you see Asian Paradise flycatcher in the park?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice common one.
I've seen them every trip. Probably one every couple of days.
Yeah,
You
good
get
stuff. And
both
good,
morphs as well, so you can get white and red.
fantastic. No,
So
it's an impressive bird, isn't it? It's a good one to
yeah,
see.
beautiful.
Rightio, guys. Well, Bret, I'll let you get on with your evening. Thank you again for an absolutely wonderful talk.
Thank you.
You are, as I say again, you're an excellent storyteller, and I love the level of enthusiasm. And I'm now more convinced than ever that I need to get out to Nagarhole. I spent too long watching everybody else get out there. Guys, I'll leave this open for another minute or so, just in case there's any more requests for the travel plans. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been wonderful to have you all along. We have got another talk next week on Baja with the wonderful Chris Breen and Helen Bryan. So that will be hugely entertaining, no doubt. And then the week after that, we've got Rainforest Workshops with Nick Garbutt and Alex Hyde, another one which is sure to be very, very entertaining. Okie dokie, let's wrap things up, guys. Have a good evening. Thanks a lot, Bret. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, take care. Thank you. Bye
See you
bye.
soon, everyone. Bye.